Hey everyone. To remind you of how variables really work in Python, I wanted to show you one simple example that's quite counterintuitive for beginners. So in Wing, I have a very simple function clearList, and what it does is it removes all the items from the input list lst. So we might think that this function is as simple to implement as setting the variable lst to the empty list. Unfortunately, this doesn't work the way that we want it to. If we start off with a non-empty list and then call clearList on it, then even though we expect lst to now be the empty list, it's not. It hasn't changed at all. And so somehow, even though this argument seems to have a changed value over here, this change doesn't seem to be persisted after the function ends. And that's quite bizarre. So let's take a closer look using the Python visualizer. Starting on line 13, I have the 3 lines of code I want to execute. I want to create a new list, clear the list, and then I want to print out the contents of my list after it's done. In the first line, a new variable gets created, myList, and remember that myList is just a variable which contains a reference to a place in memory. And so over here is my memory block that contains the list 1, 2, 3. When we call clearList and pass in the argument myList, what happens is we get this lst parameter, and that points to the same place myList points to. And so next we go into the body of the function. lst gets assigned the empty list. When this line of code executes, what's going to happen is not that this list is going to be changed. Instead, a new empty list is going to be created, and lst is going to point to that instead. However, when this happens, the original list is still there. It hasn't changed at all. The only thing that has changed is what lst is pointing to. The only thing that has changed is what the variable lst is actually referring to. And from this picture, it should be quite clear why myList doesn't change. Even though we've changed this temporary parameter lst, this has no effect whatsoever on what myList actually refers to. So if I click on forward here, the function ends and myList is unchanged. This function has failed to change either where myList actually points to or the actual contents of the list it points to. And so if I print out myList, I get the output 1, 2, 3. We've reached the halfway point in this video, so I recommend that you pause, replay the first few minutes if you're not sure about something, and then only continue on when you're ready. Okay, so this might be a bit surprising because you're actually used to writing functions which change their arguments. For example, if instead of setting lst to be the empty list, we say changed one value of lst, say by doing this, this program would work basically how you would expect. My list gets created, and then when I call clearList, lst points to the same list as my list, and then I set the index at position 0 to 500 for lst. And notice that this line of code really has changed not only what lst is pointing to, but also what my list is pointing to, because they refer to the same list. And so when I exit the function, my list now points to a list containing 500, 2, and 3. And this change has persisted after the function ended. And so the moral of this video isn't that you can't change arguments at all inside a function, because I just showed you that you can. And you've written lots of class methods that have done this already. No, the real moral is that you can't pass in a variable to a function and then use that function to assign the variable to something new. That is, whenever you pass in a variable to a function, that variable will always, always, always refer to the same place in memory after the function executes. You can't use the function to change where the variable points to. And so what we were trying to do here was actually change where mylist pointed to instead refer to the empty list. So what we were really trying to do is get clearList to behave like mylist, but this is impossible for a function to do. And this doesn't hold for just lists, it holds for every object. So for example, if I tried to change LST to a stack, that change would also not persist after the function exited. If I tried to change it to a number, it wouldn't work. A string also wouldn't work. A dictionary still wouldn't work. So if you pass in a variable like mylist to a function, then no matter what happens inside clearList, so no matter what happens in the code here, mylist, the original argument, will always point to this list. And so the only thing you can do is change the values of this list, but you can't change this arrow. Thanks for watching and have a great day.